Chapter 17. The First Pardon. Life in the camp returned to its usual routine a few days after receiving the first letters from family members. Except for a few inmates who wanted to improve their meals by planting vegetables or sweet potatoes. The rest had nothing to do. The canteen in the kitchen area, run by Chinese contractors, continued selling goods and food to inmates who had money. With my 800 Viet Dong monthly allowance, I could only afford a small tube of toothpaste, some rolling tobacco, and 500 grams of sugar. Around August, the VC forced everyone in the country to participate in the first currency exchange. They introduced a new currency where 500 South Vietnamese dong or 400 North Vietnamese dong could be exchanged for one new Viet Dong, and individuals were allowed to exchange only 10,000 old dong. The rest had to be deposited in state banks. A peculiar situation arose in the camp where some inmates, having brought in too much money, had to rely on friends to exchange it on their behalf. I also heard stories from outside the camp about wealthy southern Vietnamese people asking northern relatives to help exchange their money, only to never see the exchange money returned. I wasn't sure if such things happened in the camp, but even if they did, no one dared to speak of it. From then on, instead of 800 dong, we were only given 1 dong and 60 cents per month. At first, this was still enough to buy the same items as before, but later, it was only sufficient for a single tube of toothpaste. Vietnam's economy declined rapidly after the currency exchange. The camp administration informed us to prepare for the first National Day celebration in the South on September 2nd, 1975, what they called Independence Day. We were required to create wall newspapers, practice songs for choir, and decorate for the occasion. I wrote a short essay for the wall newspaper titled The Rolling Tobacco. In the essay, I hinted at the downward trajectory of life for Southern people after the VC's so-called liberation, though I concealed the message in such a way that the camp authorities wouldn't notice. The rolling tobacco. He gazed at the straight rows of sweet potato plants that he had cultivated with his own labor. He placed a hoe on the ground and sat on its handle. With his left hand, he wiped the sweat from his forehead, while his right hand reached into his pocket to pull out a small box. Opening the lid, he took out a roll of thin paper, tore off a small piece, and placed it in his left hand between 4 fingers. His thumb held the piece of paper steady. With his right hand, he pinched a small amount of rolling tobacco from the box, sprinkled it onto paper, and used his thumb to press it into place. Then, with both hands, he carefully rolled the tobacco into the paper, forming a cigarette with one end wider than the other. Finally, he sealed it with a lick of. The rolling cigarette between his lips reminded him of the Winston or Lucky cigarettes he used to smoke not long ago. In just a few months, it felt as though years had passed. He couldn't believe that he was now capable of cultivating rows of sweet potatoes, or rolling a cigarette with such skill. He thought to himself, everything had changed. At a meeting in the hall to announce preparations for Independence Day, an unforgettable moment occurred when several inmates were called up by the camp administration to sing. Many sang revolutionary songs we had learned in the camp, but my wife's sister, Lan, chose to sing a folk song called The Song of a Bird. The song moved many to tears with its poignant lyrics. "Oh, bird, far from the forest, you miss the mountains and streams. Oh, people, far from their loved ones, what could be sadder?" I also participated in a choir to rehearse a pre-war song called My Beloved Vietnam, a song commonly heard in the South before. The choir was led by Bu Oi, a former president of the Saigon Student Union. We chose the song because it was neutral and not as extreme as the revolutionary songs forced upon us in camp. Additionally, Deep and I were assigned to decorate the wall newspaper for Block 3, as we had previous experience designing student publications at work. This kept me busy. Everyone hoped that something significant might happen on the VC's National Day. Perhaps the release of some inmates. Each person secretly wished their name would be on the list. Rumors began circulating again. Family letters, now a source of hope, fueled speculation. While families wrote that they hoped we would reform and be released on National Day, inmates interpreted this as coded messages hinting at their release. Others claimed that family members working in the VC Ministry of Interior had confirmed that all inmates would be freed on National Day as a gesture to the VC's magnanimity. We were even told that we would be brought to Saigon for a grand release ceremony as part of the National Day celebrations. Inmates lived in hope and anticipation. The atmosphere in the camp became lively and bustling after the announcement about Independence Day preparations. Talented inmates even painted portraits of Ho Chi Minh to decorate the occasion. Although there were no longer discussions like during the 10 political lessons, cadres frequently visited rooms to observe us creating wall newspapers, practicing songs, painting, or decorating. A few days before September 2nd, 1975, the cadres arrived early in the morning, just as we woke up, to instruct us to prepare for a meeting in the hall. The camp buzzed with excitement as we learned the hall had been decorated with banners and tables draped in cloth. There was no morning exercise that day, and some inmates even skipped breakfast despite receiving their portions. Hope surged. Perhaps the rumors were true. Nearly everyone dressed in their best clothes and lined up eagerly. Laughter, cheerful faces, and lively chatter filled the air, breaking the usual silence. 2.5 months since entering the camp, this was the happiest day for the inmates. Some hummed lyrics from Vuitton and song. The joyful day has come. We rebuild our lives. The hall was adorned with Liberation Front flags and bright red banners. A large portrait of Ho Chi Minh hung at the far end, as always, with the slogan, "Nothing is more precious than independence and freedom," below it. A special banner stretched along the side wall, visible as we entered, welcoming the party and state's lenient policies. The room erupted in applause as the camp administration and cadre council entered. Commander of the camp, Hai Khan, delivered a lengthy opening speech, repeating the same themes from the 10 political lessons about the failure of U.S. imperialism and the triumph of the Vietnamese Revolution and socialism. Concluding, he quoted Ho Chi Minh, "Hanoi, Haiphong, and other cities may be destroyed, but after defeating the American enemy, we will rebuild them 10 times more beautifully." He expressed hope that we, beneficiaries of the party and state's leniency, would contribute to rebuilding the country when reintegrated into society. Then he introduced Deputy Camp Commander Bao, who would read the list of those to be released. All the inmates were excited to see Comrade Bao walking toward the microphone with a leather briefcase in hand. He solemnly pulled out a sheet of paper, placed it on the podium, and said, "To demonstrate the party and state's lenient policy, on behalf of the Camp Management Board, I am here today to announce the release list for inmates who have shown progress in re-education and will be returned to society to contribute to rebuilding the country. When you return to society, all of you must follow the policies of the local authorities." The list that Comrade Bao read out included only about 20 names. Afterward, he returned to his seat without saying another word. Later, we discovered that most of the released individuals were essential professionals or those who had previously contributed to the revolution. Everyone in the hall waited silently. Disappointment and sighs of despair enveloped the atmosphere. After a moment, Hai Khan returned to the microphone and announced that for those remaining to continue re-education, the party and state would allow family packages to be sent every 3 months. We would also be permitted to write letters home to inform our families about the date, time, and location to send the packages and what essentials we needed. Then Hai Khan declared the ceremony over. A sparse applause followed as we bid farewell to the camp management and staff. The excitement we had felt upon entering the hall gave way to disheartenment as we returned to our rooms. In the days that followed, we no longer prepared for Independence Day. Instead, we focused on writing letters to our families. The guards did not mention the occasion, and that Independence Day passed quietly without any ceremonies, except that we received an extra portion of food, a piece of meat about 3 fingers wide in both lunch and dinner. Receiving family packages was a miserable experience. How much longer would we remain in this camp? Every 3 months, another package. How many more would there be? How long could our families endure providing for us under these circumstances? With the recent currency exchange, most of the southern population had become increasingly impoverished. The communist policy aimed to create equality among the people, not equality in wealth, but equality in poverty. I thought about my family and struggled with what to request in my letter. What was my wife doing with our newborn child? How was my mother? Was she still sitting at her sewing machine or doing something else? My mother, who had raised me as a child, now had to assist my wife in providing for me in the re-education camp. Her life had been one of endless sacrifice for her children. I did not want to be a burden to my family. But what could I do in this difficult situation? I tried to choose the cheapest and most necessary items to request, such as sesame salt, fermented shrimp paste, rolling tobacco, morning glory seeds, and cold medicine. I also did not forget to ask for recent photos of my child. I wrote and rewrote the letter until the last moment before sending it, and then waited for the first package to arrive. A week later, early in the morning, a truck loaded with packages drove into the camp. Everyone waited anxiously. Team leaders went to hall to collect a list of those receiving packages, and inmates were allowed to take turns picking up their goods. The packages had been opened for inspection before being handed over to the inmates. Each package was limited to 5 kilograms, insufficient to hold all the essentials, but at least it contained the love and care of the families for their loved ones in the camp. I trembled as I opened each item, savoring the emotions within. There were 10 photographs of my wife and child. The letter, however, had been censored before reaching me. I took the pictures to show my sister-in-law and friends in the room. My child had already started to turn over on their own and no longer cried at night. My younger sister mentioned that the pictures were taken by Comrade Basson, a friend of hers. I had no idea who he was, but I felt uneasy about having a stranger involved with my family. However, given the country's current situation, what else could I expect? Our era had passed. It was now the era of the comrades. My family could not be an exception. Sorrowfully, I thought, when the country fell into communist hands, everything was lost. I recalled Nguyen Van Thieu's words and shook my head in despair. All joys eventually fade, and sorrows must also diminish over time. We returned to our daily lives in the camp. The camp management ordered collective labor throughout the entire camp instead of individual labor, which meant that all the land was reclaimed for camp. I no longer had my own vegetable and sweet potato plots. Every morning, we had to work on the camp's fields, except for those on duty cleaning or fetching water for others. Tools like hoes and shovels were communal. We had studied collective labor in our 10 lessons, and now we had the opportunity to practice those teachings, or so the camp management explained. The land in the camp was a mix of clay and gravel on hilltops, making it very hard under the sun. We used pickaxes to break the soil before making straight rows using strings for alignment. It was grueling labor, but we were still young and strong. Older inmates didn't make the rows. They planted sweet potato cuttings on prepared plots. After about a month, the camp's landscape transformed completely. The empty land was gone, replaced by rows of sweet potatoes that looked like sandy dunes in a desert. The most noticeable change was that everyone in the camp turned dark brown under the tropical summer sun. We labored every morning from 7 until noon. I assumed this was a way to accustom us to physical labor. Additionally, there wasn't enough land for 2,000 inmates to cultivate. We still had afternoons free for personal activities. Without land to grow vegetables, I spent most of my free time drawing pictures of my wife and child or crafting other artistic items. Not every inmate received family packages, and 5 kilograms of supplies every 3 months was insufficient. Over time, the heavy labor caused inmates to become malnourished. Although the rice wasn't too scant, the accompanying soup, consisting of a few pumpkin slices and a handful of peanuts, wasn't enough. Some inmates developed edema and skin diseases. Grasshoppers, crickets, and tree bugs became our flying shrimp. Rats, frogs, snakes, and geckos were considered delicacies. Wild vegetables grew scarcer. Anything that wasn't toxic became food one way or another. We joked that anything that moved was edible, and the only exception was a boat. The aluminum gagos became the most essential item for inmates. We attached a handle to it for easy carrying. It served as a water container during morning labor, a storage vessel for any supplements found in the fields, and a cooking pot upon returning to the room. During meetings or assemblies, it became a stool. Truly, it was indispensable. We even gave a nickname, Go! Empty jars of fermented tofu became smoking pipes or oil lamps. Soy sauce bottles were cut to make drinking glasses. Nothing went to waste. Life in the camp was monotonous, with days blending together. We worked, ate, waited for letters or packages, attended nightly tea meetings, and did various small tasks to get by. Each day felt endlessly long. As the old saying goes, a day in prison feels like 1,000 years outside. About 3 months later, some female inmates were released, including my sister-in-law, Lon. She left her belongings to me. I felt happy for her and for my wife, because through Lon, my wife could learn the truth about my life in the camp. That was the last group to be released from Long Ton Camp, aside from a few sporadic releases of inmates deemed necessary by the communist authorities.